In this short video, we're going to talk about word problems that involve sales tax. This is a topic that's real common to all of us. We pay sales tax on items, it seems like, every day. So we just want to, in this video, we're just going to look at setting up problems involving sales tax. So let's look at one. A gallon of milk at Harris Teeter costs $4. Sales tax is 6%. What is the total cost of the milk? Yeah. So what we want to do is try to establish a process for how we can solve these kinds of problems. You might be able to do this in your head, but in the future we'll have more difficult kinds of problems. So the process is really important that you understand it. So let's walk through briefly the steps to set up this problem. The first thing we want to do is we want to assign a variable or a letter to represent what we're trying to find. So in this case, if you look at the problem, the last sentence says, what is the total cost of the milk? So what we'll do is we'll assign a letter to represent that. In this case, we're going to let the letter T represent the phrase, the total cost of the milk. And the only reason we're doing this is that as we work through the problem, we don't want to have to keep writing the total cost of the milk, the total cost of the milk, the total cost of the milk. It just gets too messy. So instead of writing that phrase, we're just going to write the letter T. It's just going to make the problem easier to solve. So that's the first step. The second step, we're going to describe in words without using any numbers. I'm not interested in what the numbers are in the problem at this point. I just want to be able to describe in English words what we need to do to solve this problem, how the parts of the problem are related. So if we're trying to find the total cost, how do I calculate the total cost? Well, most of you probably are aware of the fact that when there's sales tax involved, what stores do is they establish the price of the item, in this case the gallon of milk, and then they add the sales tax on top of it. So your total cost to buy, in this case a gallon of milk, is going to be the sum of the milk price itself plus the sales tax. So the third step, now what we want to do, now we have sort of an English-like equation in step 2. So now we can take values from the problem and actually substitute them into our equation. So the first thing in our sort of equation in step 2 is the total cost. Well, we don't know what the total cost is, right? But in the first step, we said, well, we're going to represent the total cost by the letter T. So I'm going to, instead of write total cost the way we did in the second step, I'm going to just write the letter T. And now the milk price is the next thing. So now we're looking for the number in the problem that tells us what's the price of the milk. And right in the very first sentence, it says the gallon of milk at Harris Teeter costs $4. So now I can substitute, instead of writing the words milk price, I can put the actual price of the milk. And now I just need to add the sales tax on top of it. Most of you are probably aware, although you may not be, but sales tax is calculated in this way. It's always a percentage of whatever the item that you're buying costs. So in this case, if the item costs $4 and the sales tax is 6%, then the amount of the sales tax, the dollar amount, is figured by taking 6% of that $4 price. Yeah. So here we go. Now we have this equation that we've set up, and really all we need to do now is to solve this thing, is to do the calculations. A little bit of algebra, a little bit of arithmetic. At this point, I'm not interested in solving the problem. So whether you've had algebra or you haven't had algebra before, you should be able to do this much of the problem, to follow these steps and set the problem up. Later we'll worry about how to actually solve the problem and figure out what the total cost of the milk is. All right, let's try another one. The local Golden Corral has a buffet for only $12. Sales tax is 6%. What's the total cost of the buffet? Again, we're going to walk through those same steps that we did in the first one. So the first thing we'll do is we look and we say, all right, what are we trying to find here? What are we trying to figure out? And again, in the last sentence, it says, what's the total cost of the buffet? So what we'll do is we'll assign a variable, just a letter, to represent what we're trying to find. Since we used T before for the total cost, let's just use T again. So this time it's going to represent the phrase, the total cost of the buffet. Second step, just like we did before, we're going to describe in words. I'm not interested in numbers, no numbers, just how do we solve this, describe it in English terms. So again, the total cost is going to be the buffet price just by itself, plus the sales tax. And again, I can't stress this enough, I'm not putting any numbers in at this point. I'm just thinking about this logically. How does sales tax will come into play when you buy something? And so now we've described it in an English sort of type of equation that makes sense to us. Third step, the same thing. Now we look in the problem and we fill in the values that we know using numbers from the problem. So again, the total cost we started with, and we said in step 1, the total cost, we're going to represent that just with the letter T. The buffet price, we look in the problem and say they're at the local buffet, $12. So I'm going to replace the words buffet price with the actual dollar figure, $12. And the sales tax, again, it's a percent of what the item cost, in this case, a percent of the buffet price. So it's going to be 6% of $12. Yeah. Again, from this point on, we do a little bit of algebra, a little bit of arithmetic, and we can solve this and figure out what the actual cost was. But I'm not interested in that at this point. I'm just interested in trying to convey to you, these are the steps you go through to do all these kinds of problems. These first two that we've seen, they're pretty easy problems, and you could probably do them anyway. But in the future, we'll do more complicated problems, and it's really going to be important that you can follow this process to solve those word problems. Last one. All right, let's try one more. This would be maybe a little bit more difficult, but we'll stick to our guns and stick to our process, and we'll be able to figure this out. Eric bought a canoe. The total cost of the canoe, including sales tax, was $315. If the sales tax was 5%, what was the price of the canoe? So this is a little bit different from those other two problems that we did. On those two, we were looking for the total cost. This time they tell us the total cost, and we have to figure out what the price of the item was, in this case the canoe. So let's just walk through. We're going to use the same process, and we'll see what we can do with this problem. So again, steps to set up this problem, exactly the same as before. We'll assign a variable or a letter to represent what we're trying to find. And in this case, since we're trying to find the price of the canoe, I decided to use the letter P for price instead of T for total cost. Again, you can use whatever you want, P, X, Y, T, whatever. All right, so step 1, good. Step 2, we're going to describe in words, again, the relationship between these parts of the problem. And it's going to be in English, no numbers. We're not interested in numbers at this point. So just like we did before, sales tax and item price and total cost, their relationship to each other is always the same. So we're going to use the same phrase that we used before, where the total cost is equal to the canoe price plus the sales tax. No different from that the other two problems, even though we're trying to find something different. Now, in the third step is the only place we'll see something different, but the process is the same. So now we'll fill in values that we know from the problem. Looking at the problem, the total cost, remember before we didn't know this, but this time we do. The total cost was $315. The canoe price, if we look in the problem, we see that's what we're trying to find, right? That's what we're trying to figure out. And in step 1, we said we're going to represent the price of the canoe by the letter P. So here, instead of writing the canoe price, we're just going to write the letter P. Now we'll have to add the sales tax to it. And remember, just like in those other problems, the sales tax is always calculated by taking a percent of the price of the item. So in this case, it's going to look a little bit funny, but it's the same thing we did in the other problems. It's going to be 5% of, now since we don't know the canoe price, we're representing the canoe price by the letter P, it's going to be 5% of P. Remember, this was like 6% of the milk price in the previous problems, but this time it's the same thing. It's a percent of the price of the item, so it's 5% of P. Again, this is looks like it's a little more difficult problem to solve, and at this point I'm still not interested in actually trying to solve the problem, but with some algebra and arithmetic we could figure it out. We'll save that for a later video, or we'll talk about it in class. Again, the process is the same for whether we're trying to figure the price of the item or the total cost of the item. The process is what's important. All right, we're done. So what I would suggest is that in your notes somewhere, you write down these 3 steps that we took to set up the sales tax problems. Remember that it didn't matter what we were trying to find, whether we were trying to find the price of the item, whether we were trying to find the total cost of the item, and it would even apply to when we're trying to figure out what the sales tax is. It's the same process each time. So the process of which you want to remember. All right, we're done. Thanks for watching.